it is, a huge blow for this Trump administration, in particular at a time when you've heard the president try to project confidence about completely diminishing Iran's military capabilities. And so
I was waiting all day to cover this story to see if we would get any new updates or confirmation out of the Pentagon, but it looks like that's not coming until at least tomorrow morning. Both U.S. Central Command and the Trump White House have called a lid, which means no more media access. We're not going to say anything for the time being. So that said, based on what we currently know, I want to speak about this situation over Iran today, where for the first time since this conflict has started, they have apparently successfully shot down one of our fighter jets, in this case being an F-15. And as we speak, a search and rescue operation is underway. Apparently, the first pilot has been successfully extracted, but they're still looking for the second pilot, or at least that's what's being said publicly. We don't have the full details. Now, as you could expect, this situation is being heavily weaponized by the panicans, the mainstream media, and the pro-Iran third world propagandists on social media, especially to say, see, look, this is a catastrophic defeat for America. Trump is lying. Clearly, this is proof America doesn't have air superiority because Iran shot down one fighter jet in an entire month of conflict, which I say, hold on a second. Two things can be true. Obviously, this is objectively not a good thing, okay? I will concede, yeah, it's not good that our fighter jet got shot down, and we are deeply praying on this Good Friday for a successful return of our second serviceman who's missing basically right now in Iran, and we'll give you the updates in terms of what we've heard and what we know about this. But at the same time, in the context of military strategy or history, it is also utterly ridiculous to claim, oh, clearly, that's proof that we're losing a conflict or we don't have air superiority because one plane got shot down. Okay, of the some 15,000 sorties that have been flown over Iran in the course of now over a month of conflict, to say that losing one fighter plane is proof that you lost, or if any casualties happen in a military conflict, that's proof you lost the conflict, is just a ridiculous standard. Like, these people know nothing about warfare, I suppose, in general, you know? Like, what are you even talking about? And I'm not trying to downplay the situation, right? I mean, for every U.S. service member, I believe it's now 7 or 13 or so that have been lost over the course of this conflict, it is a deep tragedy. These people ought to be honored as American heroes. We should pray for their families, absolutely. And yes, that is a real cost and a downside of these types of interventions that should be weighed before you go in. At the same time, though, to pretend as if, again, because the enemy does like 1% of damage to you to a fighter jet that's now over 50 years old is completely ridiculous. But that said, I guess let us address this talking point in today's video. We'll first of all bring you this story and then bring you the stupid third world propaganda about it, you know. But it's obviously the case that a bunch of leftists and third worldists around the world are trying to desperately search for a moment where they can declare Iranian victory and look, oh, the evil American empire is losing. So, you know, they hop on these moments 100%, right? It's like one thing can happen and they'll say, oh, look, actually, if you remember a couple of weeks ago, when F-35 got damaged, it didn't even go down. It successfully did an emergency landing in friendly territory, but because it got damaged by the Iranians, they said, look, this is proof we stopped the unkillable American empire, as if planes have never been shot down in war. What are you even talking about? But we'll address that, guys. First, though, do us a favor. If you enjoy our content, make sure you hit that like button down below. Subscribe to the channel if you are new. That's the best way to support our work. It also ensures that you can stay up to date with all the latest news and coverage. And that said, in today's video, we'll bring you this story about the F-15 as well as reports of where the negotiations are going, and apparently Trump launching, or the coalition at least, launching some massive airstrikes on the Iranian capital tonight. What does it all mean? Let's talk about that. So, anyways, first and foremost, here's what we know thus far, is that today, yes, indeed, a U.S. F-15E Strike Eagle shot down over Iran. First U.S. service member successfully recovered via a search and rescue operation. As we know, it's believed that the second downed U.S. pilot made contact with U.S. forces via an emergency encrypted radio. But as of this time, and it's been several hours, we don't know what that official status is. It's currently nightfall in Iran, so it's believed that maybe now would be the time to do a search and rescue operation using the cover of darkness. We don't know, but take a listen.
Is it safer, General, for the weapons officer, for the missing military member, to be missing at night or during the day? I know night vision goggles are very powerful, very strong. Is it better for them to be missing when it's dark than during the daytime?
Well, Trace, I would love to talk to you about some of these things, but we don't want to give away our tactics and what we try to do to the enemy. Darkness is a place that Western air forces do way better in than our opponents, and I'll just leave it there.
Now, the area we're talking about is Khuzestan province. It's scarcely populated, mountainous, it's dry. It's roughly the size of Delaware, 6,000 square miles. It is dark in this part of the world already, but the technology means that the search can continue. In fact, with the technology, advantage goes to the guys who have the better technology. The aircraft we're talking about, F-15E Strike Eagle, has a crew of 2. This is a fighter jet that can carry heavy loads. It does air to ground, particularly as it relates to combat in Iran. What you're looking at there is the ejector seat. Pictures of that surfaced through the Iranians and through social media. The pictures we see are consistent with an ejector seat that would have been in this F-15E Strike Eagle. Also, we've got information of the crew members who were rescued. The one crew member was rescued. We don't know if that's the pilot or the weapons operator in this aircraft, but we do know that he's receiving medical treatment, and we have from a well-placed source that the U.S. forces, when they were on the ground rescuing that individual, they did indeed come under enemy fire. Will?
So yeah, what we know thus far is that these pilots went down over a remote and rural area of Iran. We did see some social media videos today of allegedly Iranian police officers trying to shoot their handguns up in the sky at Apache helicopters, which I don't think is all that effective, but that could be a reference to the apparent enemy fire we could have come under, or maybe it was something more intense. Maybe we met actual Iranian forces on the ground. Who knows? But what we do know, right, is that according to U.S. forces, that first rescue was successful. Now we are just pending the second. We also know that 2 U.S. helicopters were damaged in this search and rescue operation, right? Struck by fire, likely coming from the ground. But at the same time, those helicopters made it out safely. Okay, so they took some damage, but they didn't go down. We also know that an A-10 Warthog, that is a low-flying, relatively slow U.S. attack plane, but probably good for finding someone in a search and rescue situation, right? Also did take some fire. It managed to, we believe at this time, crash land in friendly waters, but it made it out of Iran, right? So that's not a situation where we're looking for that pilot as well. And so this is the current situation. And again, very much praying that the rescue here goes smoothly, obviously. But as you could likely expect, okay, this whole situation is being used by the propagandists to argue clearly this is proof we don't have control over Iranian airspace. We don't have air superiority. Iran is humiliating us, etc., etc. As a matter of fact, take a listen to the way CNN is going to frame this, right? This is a huge blow to the Trump administration when objectively, for a lot of reasons I'll explain, it's just not, okay? It's just not. I'm not here to, again, downplay the situation because we hope our pilots come home safely, right? And we're praying for that 100%. But let's get into a lot of people who have apparently never observed warfare, never studied how this stuff actually works. Try to explain to us why, you know, this is the biggest deal in a military context ever. Okay.
Let's go now to Elena Treen at the White House. Elena, what are you hearing there?
Yeah, look, so this is reporting from, 3 U.S. officials, so my colleague Haley Britsky, Kevin Liptak, and I, as Jim laid out, that a U.S. fighter jet has been shot down over Iran and search and rescue is underway. I will note that at this point, there is very little information we actually know about what is happening related to this. We do not know where the plane went down. We do not know the status of the crew on board, and we are not hearing any official word from the U.S. military or the White House at this moment, though, of course, we do know that they are monitoring this very closely, and obviously this is a very sensitive thing, and so they're being very careful with what they're going to be putting out publicly. Now, I will say, one thing we have been hearing, of course, is, repeatedly I'm hearing in my conversations with people in that building behind me, you have to be careful with what you're hearing from the Iranian state media, which, of course, has been sharing a lot of videos and images this morning of this, this, but what we did hear as well from the state-run Tasman agency, they said that the search for any missing crew had, quote, so far been unsuccessful. Now, I do want to say we are waiting to hear what the White House will ultimately say on this, and similarly with the military. But it is, a huge blow for this Trump administration, in particular at a time when you've heard the president try to project confidence about completely diminishing Iran's military capabilities. And so we'll keep you posted as we learn more on this, Wolf and Pam.
Yeah, so you can already start to see the framing in the way this is being spun, right? It was a huge blow to the Trump administration. A bunch of people on social media today tried to argue that it was catastrophic for the U.S. air campaign. See, this is proof we don't have air superiority. Look, some planes went down. One fighter jet went down. 3 low-flying, slow search and rescue aircraft took some enemy fire. So clearly Trump is lying when he says we've decimated Iran's military or we have air superiority. To which I say, you people know nothing about warfare. What are these people even talking about? Like, you understand how ridiculous that is? It's wrong to say you're dominating someone in a military conflict because, they have some ability to, like, if one time in over a month, shoot down an enemy aircraft or inflict a very small amount of casualties proportional to what you're able to inflict. This clearly shows you're losing the war, right? Which is just stupid and idiotic logic. So that said, let's break this down in actual context, right? What does it actually mean to lose the F-15 over Iran? I will admit, for the very reasons you're seeing, it's not good simply because it's going to be a huge propaganda victory for the other side who's going to make the biggest deal out of this ever. But if we're to be honest about this objective, again, from a military strategy standpoint, we're talking about a plane here, first and foremost, in the F-15, that is over 50 years old, okay? It took its first combat flight in 1976, okay? So this is not to say the F-15 doesn't have uses. The reason it hasn't been retired and the reason it's been upgraded over the years is because it's actually such a good aircraft. But just please keep in mind, first and foremost, this is the oldest technology, literally, that America's throwing out onto the battlefield, okay? It's not like they took down a cutting-edge, modern, 5th-gen fighter like the F-35, the F-22, even an older one like the F-18. No, we're talking about a plane that was basically developed during the Vietnam War, and they're bragging, oh, clearly it's the biggest deal ever. It's the death blow to the American empire that they managed to hit one of them, right? And of course, in the context of warfare, it's actually the reality. Yes, you do lose some aircraft. Here are some numbers for you of recent U.S. engagements. For example, during the first Gulf War, the U.S. alone, in combat, okay, so this is not counting other stuff like friendly fire, mechanical issues. In combat, we lost around 28 fixed-wing aircraft. 28 went down. Mostly were due to SAMs, right? Surface-to-air missiles, anti-aircraft fire. One of them went down over aerial combat with a MiG-29. But yeah, 28 fixed-wing fighters and planes in general that we lost, okay? We lost 1 so far due to combat in the course of this conflict. 28 in the first Gulf War, 1 right now. And when you put the whole coalition of the first Gulf War together, you're talking about around 50 planes that were lost, okay? This is not counting helicopters, other stuff, etc. Even during the second Gulf War, when our technology continued to improve and largely from the aerial perspective was a pretty big domination, still in that case lost 2 fixed-wing aircraft in combat, right? Even during the NATO bombing of Yugoslavia, a very forgotten conflict that America ever got involved in, okay? Even there, we lost 2 aircraft. That was 1 F-16 and 1 F-117 Nighthawk, which is to say what? Which is to make the point of what? Yes, this happens in warfare. You lose planes sometimes. It does not magically all of a sudden show that we don't have air superiority. And to argue that would be to say, okay, so America didn't have air superiority over Iraq in the first or second Gulf War because some planes went down. Ridiculous argument, okay? No one from a military strategy perspective would say, oh, America and Iraq were clearly on equal military footing because, look, they damaged 1 aircraft or 2 aircraft, or they killed a handful of U.S. soldiers compared to Iraqi losses. It's a ridiculous case to make, right? Are you going to argue Serbia beat us? Serbia beat us because they shot down 2 American aircraft? What are we even talking about here, right? It's a ridiculous argument. It's fundamentally dishonest, but these people know what they're doing. And here's another great point, okay? I would like people to also keep in mind that as we speak, we are conducting a search and rescue operation in Iran using helicopters, okay? So here, you want to talk about air superiority. This is air superiority. The fact that we're using helicopters, which fly slow, they're low to the ground, they're easy to hit, the same goes for the A-10 Warthog. If you need proof that America does still believe it has air superiority, there it is right there, right? And sure, again, just because you have air superiority doesn't mean the enemy can't do anything. Okay, sure. They have small arms fire. They can hit you with some stuff. Okay, this happens in conflict. This happens in warfare. But still, okay, if you're confident enough to go and do a search and rescue operation from the ground, literally land a helicopter and extract, yes, clearly the strategic fear of Iranian defenses is not all that high. And no, this doesn't suddenly negate American air superiority. As this guy points out in response to one of these characters trying to make a big deal out of it, right? There's nothing catastrophic about one plane being shot down in 5 weeks of operations, 15,000 sorties, by the way, 15,000 combat missions against a supposed regional powerhouse with one member of the crew already rescued, as the U.S. has created such aerial dominance that it can fly into Iran's airspace and extract a downed pilot. Yes, exactly, right? And to make some historical comparisons that perhaps people will understand, okay, America is widely accepted to have had air superiority over Japan, for example, in 1945, especially when we dropped the bomb. But America still lost some planes over Japan. Why is that? Because air superiority doesn't mean the skies are 100% safe. You're at war. These things happen. Casualties happen. It means you're portraying dominance over them. It doesn't mean zero losses or no bad things can ever happen, okay? The same would be true of Germany in 1945, right? Would these characters have gone back in time then and looked at the fate of the Third Reich, post-Ardennes offensive, that failing, the walls completely closing in, nothing is working, right? And say, well, look, the Germans are still killing people. That means they're winning the war. That's not how it works, okay? That's such a ridiculous case to be made. But, you know, this is what these people are doing. They're just, I repeat, lying. They're being dishonest. And their argument is really silly. We repeat, if the air superiority is a lie, how did we do the search and rescue operation? That's probably the best point you could make about it, right? You know? And bear in mind as well, the current report, yes, as it was shot down, could have also had to do with the systems failure, mechanical failure as well, right? We don't know the full details. Some of this information that comes out is inaccurate, but we're even taking the logic. We're going to believe the theory 100%. This was shot down in some form in combat due to combat-related reasons, and even still, it doesn't make the case these people think it does. Now, certainly, we, from the beginning, have wanted this to have a speedy end, right? Wrap it up as quickly as possible, minimize your own losses, don't get caught in a 2003-style quagmire 100%. So the longer this goes, if this hypothetically were to go for several years, which I don't think is the case, but if it were, yeah, then you would see mounting losses and these things would have to be considered. But still, right? Saying that one fighter jet is the end of the world, that's just not how warfare works. It's just not, especially the oldest fighter jet in your entire military, you know? But let people say what they're going to believe. That said, when asked today, Trump basically did not yet comment on what he would do in response to this incident or in response if the second pilot didn't make it home safely. However, what we do know at the current moment is that the Iranian capital of Tehran is allegedly receiving heavy airstrikes from U.S. and Israeli forces following the whole incident today. So one could read this as some type of response, or perhaps a response to the diplomatic side of it, which we'll cover in a second. But it's currently being reported, actually, as of now, that half of Tehran, half of the city, is reportedly now without power amidst these strikes. But again, we repeat, these people allegedly claim that we don't have air superiority or something, you know? Okay. That said, we also saw this kind of almost escalatory statement today from Trump, although we know he does a lot of this. He says one thing, says another. He wants to be unpredictable. But he did go out and state the following, quote, "With a little more time, we can easily open the Hormuz Strait, take the oil, and make a fortune. It would be a gusher for the world," President Donald J. Trump, right? Basically threatening to seize control of Iran's oil, take it for ourselves, sell it for ourselves, make a bunch of money. What could this possibly mean? Why has he said this? Well, it could all be related to alleged news today that the negotiations, the current peace talks between Iran and the United States have broken down, which, you know, we've seen them break down about 1 million times now, and then they resume again. And so you never know with these people, really. But again, you watch allegedly peace talks break down, and then, you know, recent U.S. bombing on a bridge, now massive airstrikes on Tehran tonight. What is going on? I don't know. Take a listen.
That have come out. First of all, the Wall Street Journal had a story on the mediators saying the latest efforts to reach a ceasefire have hit a quote-unquote dead end. They say Iran's officially told the mediators it's not willing to meet U.S. officials in Islamabad in the coming days. Then the president just did a brief interview with NBC, didn't talk about the specifics of this plane that we were just talking about with the general, but he was asked if it will have any effect, Aaron, on the negotiations, and his quote was, no, not at all. No, it's war. We're in war, Garrett, the reporter that he was speaking to. So
yeah, certainly if I were to guess, the recent breakdown in negotiations could certainly have something to do with the current escalation in attacks. Now, that said, we should also ask the question, why does it appear that negotiations broke down? And from what I'm gathering, it looks like yet another case actually of just pure division and internal strife within the Iranian government. These people can't get it together. They tell us one thing, then the IRGC basically threatens to kill them if they don't cooperate and act a more hardline against the US, and then there's backlash, and then this happens. And it sounds like that exact scenario has gone down with Iran's president. Now, we repeat, the president of Iran seems to be someone who's willing to talk, wants to negotiate, as a matter of fact, believes it's crucial to get this done quickly so that way Iran's economy can recover and all of that. And yet, as you can see, his call to end the war has sparked fierce internal backlash in Iran, which could also explain, right, why the president essentially abandoned the peace talks here, because the government's just a mess. Okay, so Iranian President Masoud Pezeshkian is facing backlash after signaling a willingness to end the war, exposing deep divisions within Iran's political and military establishment, which we've talked about, by the way. In a Tuesday phone call with European Council President Antonio Costa, the Iran president said Iran is willing to help bring the conflict with the United States and Israel to an end, but that essential conditions, especially guarantees to prevent renewed aggression, are met, according to London-based Iran International. But Pezeshkian's remarks were immediately criticized by Iranian officials, right? The hardliners said, no, don't end the war. What are you talking about here? So the position of the Islamic Republic of Iran regarding the defense of the nation against the aggression of evildoers and the conditions for ending the imposed war has not changed, and there is no regard for the delusions and lies of criminals, said Mehdi Tabahi, the deputy communications director at the president's office. And this all started when, in an open letter published on X, hardline Iranian activist Mohammad Shrikvand criticized Pezeshkian's appeal for European guarantees, saying, quote, "When you yourself state the United States does not believe in diplomacy, what does speaking of guarantees for ending the war mean other than repeating a costly mistake?" he wrote. "This war is a battle of truth against falsehood and an arena of clashing wills. The government must play on this field, not on promises that have repeatedly proven unreliable." So, in other words, right, this guy, the president who seemed to have been negotiating with us, was rebuked by the hardliners still left in the regime. And because of the lack of control within Iran's government, they basically called a lid, it would appear here, on mediations and negotiations. So, that said, what does it mean? Well, I think honestly, at a certain point, given the fact that Iran's government is this dysfunctional and, we don't even know what's going on, that if it's still to be true that there's a 2 to 3 week deadline on Operation Epic Fury, that maybe at a certain point, you just have to consider, well, what happens if we pull out without an actual negotiated settlement or an actual agreement, right? You could almost say to a degree that also gives leverage. Hey, we can go back in at any time, right? We never declared this thing over. But after all, if it's the case, well, you've decimated most of their conventional military. You do enough to where either they can't threaten the Strait of Hormuz, or, as Trump has sort of threatened, leave the Strait of Hormuz and just say, look, Europe, NATO, other countries around the world, Asia, that's your problem now. Figure out what you're going to do with the Iranians, but we don't get our oil from there. It's not our problem necessarily. So you go and make deals. And by the way, as we covered in our last video, if France, as we speak, and European countries are trying to make secret backdoor deals with Iran to get the Strait of Hormuz anyway, then what the heck are we even doing trying to, deal with the Strait of Hormuz? We're trying to free it from Iranian control only for our supposed U.S. allies to be just trying to negotiate and keep it under Iranian control, but have that benefit themselves. So, to a certain degree, you have to ask, okay, if the initial military objectives were ballistic missiles, nuclear weapons, we want to deal a blow to those things, we absolutely did. If, the maybe political angle is we're going to take out the leaders of the regime, see what happens over the next couple of months, couple of years, that's still on the table, right? And I think, frankly, the stability of Iran's not going to last very long. Just as I've been saying, keep an eye on that, because you've wiped out a lot of leadership. There's going to be power struggles. There's going to be chaos. Okay, so to pretend as if regime change won't happen or hasn't happened, it's very early to say that. But, you have that angle of it. But as it pertains to the Strait, who are we even doing that for? The world oil markets, right? Asian countries, European countries, just so that way the supply and demand would be alleviated and everyone's oil would be cheaper. But I repeat, if all these countries are making deals with Iran anyway behind our back, then screw it. We should leave the Strait of Hormuz to them, I don't know. Now, Trump has also threatened, why don't we just seize it? That could be another possibility. He's going to follow through on the ground incursion on Karg Island or something like that, and that'll be the final act of the war. Who knows, right? It's rather unpredictable, and I think Trump likes it that way. But, this is just the situation at the current time. And President Trump, as we know, has been in the Oval Office and White House all day. And as we repeat, the security team, the White House, CENTCOM, they've all called a lid. So we'll find out tomorrow morning what happened with this second F-15 crew member, what's going to be the case in this conflict going forward. But for now, guys, let's all say a prayer for our American service member currently trapped in Iran, we believe, right? And that said, let me know your thoughts. Be sure to leave a like on this video, subscribe to the channel if you are new. Have a solemn Good Friday. God bless and peace.